The chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Republican Senator John McCain. Welcome, Senator McCain. Good to see you. You were smiling through much of that interview with Mr. Peskov. But the Russians are essentially saying that the sanctions imposed by Barack Obama are worse than a nuclear standoff, that it's worse than the Cold War right now. And yet, as George pointed out, there was no public retaliation after the sanctions were imposed. What does that tell you?
I don't know what it tells me, except that they're succeeding. They're succeeding in continuing their dismemberment of Ukraine. They're succeeding in exerting enormous influence in the Middle East, which they never had before. They are succeeding. They have succeeded in interfering with our election, and we know that they continue that in the French elections and other elections. And so far, they have paid a little or no penalty for all of this misbehavior, the pattern. Listening to that guy, watching him, that's echoes of the Cold War, where they just tell flat-out lies. You know, that's the way it is.
And how about President Trump's response and his tweets?
Well, I hope that the president will respond, but Mr. Tillerson's statement that the Syrian people will determine their own future, that is one of the more unusual statements I've ever heard. I know that Mr. Tillerson was busy, but did he miss the barrel bombing? Did he miss the Iranian Revolutionary Guard? Did he miss the Russians striking with precision weapons hospitals in Aleppo, deliberately killing people in hospitals?
And you heard what Ambassador Haley said about Syria.
And to say now we're going to turn our backs on these people? What about the thousands we have trained and equipped? What about those people? What signal do we send people who struggle for freedom around the world? That Syria is determining its own future? Look, let's go back a few years. Bashar Assad was on his way out the door before Hezbollah came in with the Iranians sponsoring them and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. How can the Syrian people determine their own future?
Very tough to do that right now. I want to go back to Russia, and obviously Syria is very important, but President Trump just tweeted, the real story is the surveillance, find the leakers. Is the real story the surveillance, or what's going on in the investigation?
I think all of it needs to be examined. Obviously, if there was intentional disclosure of names of people who were in the Trump campaign, that has to be revealed. But the fact is that we know for a fact the Russians tried to change the outcome of our election, attacking the very fundamental of democracy. We know they did that. We need to know how, we need to know why, and most of all, we need to know what to do to prevent this kind of activity, which they continue to carry on in free nations around the world.
Peskov made no secret that Vladimir Putin preferred Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton. You've heard the kinds of things that President Trump says and tweets about the Russians and Putin, some very positive remarks. Do you think there is a possibility that the Russians are still trying to help President Trump?
No, I would be astounded. And by the way, I think the national security team that the president has assembled is outstanding, and I hope that he listens to them, because they don't have any illusions about Vladimir Putin and Russian behavior. So, but this is why we need a select committee, Martha. Every time we turn around, another shoe drops from this centipede. And we need to examine all of the aspects of it, President Trump's priorities and the other priorities that many of us believe exist.
Sean Spicer said what Congressman Nunes did from the Intelligence Committee when he received the secret information at the White House was both routine and proper. What he did, what he saw, and who he met with is 100% proper. Do you think that's true?
It's hard to respond, but the fact is that these committees, especially intelligence committees and armed services committees, we work closely together as Republicans and Democrats. We have to. It's for the good of the security of the nation and the men and women who serve us. I'm happy to see the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Warner and Senator Burr, working closely together. This is obviously a schism between Republican and Democrat, let alone the bizarre fashion with which all of this happened. If we're really going to get to the bottom of these things, it's got to be done in a bipartisan fashion. And as far as I could tell, Congressman Nunes killed that.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. It's very good to see you. We'll talk more about Syria in the future. Very serious problem indeed.